Hey, what's up, guys? It is Sunday night school, and I want to do one more lesson out of the book of Romans because this was a passage that our lesson book kind of skipped over, and I just want to go back and at least talk about it, at least expose us to it, because I think it has a pretty good lesson to teach us. It's Romans chapter 14, verses 13 through 23. So I would encourage you to pause this and read that just so you can have a full context and a full idea of where we are heading. And I want to read verse 13 for you, and then I'll kind of summarize the rest. Paul says, "Therefore, let us not pass judgment on one another any longer, but rather let's decide never to put a stumbling block or hindrance in the way of a brother." Now, he's saying this because in the Old Testament, there was this command that the Israelites, that the Jews, that the Christians basically were not allowed to eat certain kinds of foods. Okay? Then in the New Testament, Jesus basically says that these foods are okay, sort of updating the command. You can choose not to eat them or you can eat them. Neither one is wrong. But that command created two types of people: the traditionalist, who wanted to stay away from the foods still, and then you had the more contemporary, the more liberal group who indulged. Okay, they said, if we can eat it, let's do it. We hungry. And so what was happening is that the groups would start judging one another. They would start putting stumbling blocks and hindrances in front of each other, trying to slow down their faith walk. Okay, each one was progressing, but then they would look at one another and say, hey, you're eating that and you shouldn't. And one would say, well, you're not eating it and you should. But it was offensive to them, and it created a lot of arguments. It created a lot of debate that there's just no room for that in the church. So Paul was saying, let's stop the judgment. Okay, if you want to stay traditional, great, you're doing wonderful. If you want to join the contemporary crowd, great, let's go. Okay, what he says though later on is that it is not good to eat meat or drink wine or do anything that causes your brother to stumble. And so that's where you and I really need to perk up our ears and pay attention, because there's a lot of things that you and I can do that can spiritually offend somebody. Okay, so let me give you a couple of examples. One being, there's a lot of television shows, a lot of Netflix, a lot of Hulu, a lot of Amazon Prime, and okay, a lot of these shows can be offensive to somebody in their Christian walk. They may not want to watch those shows because of the content, because of the language, because of the sexual content that's in it. However, some people can watch those shows and not really be affected at all. Okay, it's completely up to you. You need to use your best judgment, but we never need to conform to those kinds of things. And we should never tempt someone or encourage someone to watch these shows who might have an issue or who might be slowed down in their faith if they watch that. Like if they watch it, they might start cussing up a storm. Okay, they might, participate in the activities that they shouldn't participate in by watching that show. Same thing goes for music. Same thing goes for a lot of things. Paul says to you and me, let's not put a stumbling block in front of our brother. Let's not put a hindrance in front of our sister. What he says instead, in verse 19, let us pursue what makes for peace and mutual upbuilding. In other words, let's encourage one another. Let's find the things that we have in common and let's focus on those. Let's capitalize on those. Let's amplify those. Let's use those things to help our faith walk get stronger and faster and help the momentum to keep going. I'll close with this illustration. When the police are in a high-speed chase with an out-of-control car, somebody's broken the law, somebody's took off, a lot of times, the way that they slow this car down and finally capture them, and you've seen this before, they put out the spikes, okay? And what that does is the spikes pop the tires, pop the tires. They let the air out of the tires, and so it's harder to control the vehicle that way, and they ultimately either slow down or they crash. And so that gives the police, the opportunity to go and to arrest them. What we need to be careful of is to not put a stumbling block in front of our brother, not put a hindrance in front of our brother. We need to be careful not to let the air out of someone's faith. We need to be careful to inflate the tire, to keep the tire inflated, not let the air out of it, even if we disagree on some issues. Have a good week, guys.